Hey folks, Labruski here, back in a new Comics Corner. I hope everyone is doing well. Before we dive in to today's book, if you could please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. Today's book that we are going to be talking about is We Called Them Giants, written by Kieron Gillion, art by Stephanie Hans, and then lettering done by Clayton Cowles. To give you guys kind of a quick story synopsis of this book, it follows Lori as she wakes up one morning and she kind of discovers everyone has disappeared, right? Or so it seems. She runs into another character, Annette, and these two are polar opposites each other. So it makes for an interesting relationship and ultimately an interesting book to kind of see how these two are going to survive and get along in a world that seemingly everyone has disappeared in. Ultimately, we are introduced to other characters and whatnot. And kind of the big thing about this book is that there's giants now, right? The kind of crash land on Earth. It seems like there's only two, and we have a ruby one and then an emerald one. So that's thrown into the mix. It is a good story overall. I do recommend this book. So if you're curious about it, definitely check it out, read it before watching the rest of this video. I'm going to talk about some minor spoilers and whatnot. So I do suggest if you are at all interested in reading it, you do read it and come back and let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. So, quick rundown of the character. So we have Lori. She's an orphan, and that does play kind of a big part into her character. She has trust issues. That's made very clear to the reader right off the bat within the first couple pages. She bounced around between foster homes growing up, and promises were made to her that weren't kept. So ultimately, she has a very bleak outlook of the world, and she's very pessimistic. And this contrasts beautifully to the other main character of Annette, who is very optimistic, almost too eager to trust other people. And she comes from a very loving home and has loving parents. And so their relationship is really what makes this book work for me in a lot of ways. It's one of my favorite things about this book. Um, but before we dive into that, other characters, we have Beatrice. She's just an older lady who kind of teams up with Lori and Annette. And I don't love her character. There's nothing that I necessarily hate or dislike, but I just don't see the role she plays. I don't like you take this character out and the story almost remains the same, right? So that's kind of a thing I didn't enjoy about the book. But other characters, we have the group, the dogs, they're called. They're kind of the bad guys in a lot of ways. And their presence is known throughout the book. And yeah, it seems like just a group of guys. And it's interesting too because they wear bird masks, but they're called the dogs. And there's even a joke about that. And I think that's um, is an interesting thing that never really gets explored, but I don't think it has to. We also have the wolves, they're actual wolves, right? And they are by far the most menacing and immediate threat to the main cast of characters. But also we have the two giants. We have a ruby giant and an emerald giant. So the good of the book. What did I really love about this book? So I really love the theme of this book, the message that was being sent. It's really all about learning to trust, learning to love, and the importance of that, and how, in a lot of cases, that can be vital to survival, right? So that theme is just very kind of heartwarming and whatnot, and it makes perfect sense for the arc of the character Lori and whatnot, and her kind of being learning to be open about trusting other people, or in some cases, giants. Another thing I really loved about this book is the relationship between Lori and Annette. I think for me, that is one of the strongest positives of this book. I love how they're polar opposites, and it really works in how they kind of have learned to adapt to their situation and ultimately learn to rely on each other to survive. I think that relationship is super, super strong. Um, the other thing I love about this book is the artwork. The artwork is so beautiful. I love how the background and the world is very kind of grayish blue in a lot of ways, and it sets a very bleak tone, right? But you do have spurts of beautiful colors. We see that with the Giants, but then also in other cases too. And it just the contrast between the beautiful colors in the background is just beautiful. The artwork, I absolutely love it. It almost, in some ways, reminds me of Saga a little bit. And I love Saga. It's my favorite comic. So that's always a plus, too. Um, and I love how short and sweet this book is. It really does not stick around longer than it needs to. You can easily read it within a night. I took a couple days to read it and kind of digest it, if you will, but you easily can finish this within a couple hours, if that. Like, it is very much short and sweet. Um, it's not very dense or anything like that. And the final thing that I really loved about this book is the fact that they never really explain what happened to the people on Earth, right? Or why the giants are there. They never dive into that at all. And in some cases, that may be kind of a negative, but here I think it really works because that's not the main focus of the story. The main focus of the story is Lori and then also Lori and Annette. Those two really are the main focus, and where the more um, payoff of the book is with those characters, not the world that's being set up. It would be interesting to see it in another installment in this series if they were to continue it. I think they could, but I think it ends in a way where they don't have to. I think you get a full story here. It's short and sweet, um, and yeah, those are for me kind of the positives of the book. So, and now let's talk about some of the negatives. I do have some very minor nitpicks about this book, to be honest with you. Very small things that you may read it and you may disagree with me entirely. And if that's the case, please let me know in the comment section down below. We'll have a conversation about it. I love that sort of thing. But some negatives for me is, like I mentioned before, I don't really know the role that Beatrice is supposed to play. Like, I was thinking about it, and if you take that character out entirely, maybe change like a couple small things, the story remains the same, right? Like, she doesn't add any emotional whatever to the book. You don't really care about that character at all. So I don't understand why she's in there, to be honest. The way she's introduced is pretty cool, though, I will say. But other than that, there's really no emotional depth or anything like that to the character. Another thing I was not a huge fan of is the fact that there was a little bit more, tell and not show, right? So I wish there was more show, not tell. And a perfect example of this, minor spoilers here, is that within the first pages, right, we learn a little bit about Lori and her background, and how she bounced around between orphanages and foster homes. And I wish they would have just showed that, relied solely on visual storytelling to portray that in some sort of maybe montage spread out through, the first couple pages. I think that would have been more effective for the reader in a lot of ways. And, because they blatantly kind of just say that she has trust issues, right? And not to say that doesn't 100% work, because it does. There is some emotional payoff, right, as I stated. But I think it would have benefited if it just kind of solely relied on more of the visual storytelling that could have been done in this book. A couple other things that didn't quite work for me. There was a few action to action transitions that I had a difficult time following. I was like, what is going on here? And, I had to take a minute to be like, okay, the character's here, here, here. So I think the way it was, some of those panels were laid out wasn't fully effective. And the tiniest nitpick in the world, to be honest with you, but something I think maybe would have helped this this book overall or this graphic novel is if they had chapters. This book has no chapters. Um, and there are a couple places where they could have, put a break in there, right? And I think it maybe would have helped the pacing of the story, because I think when you put chapters into a book or anything like that, you almost kind of control the pacing of a book, right? Or any, graphic novel, comic, whatever. You control the pacing of that book. And here, not to say the pacing's fully off, but, if you take a while to read it, it may feel a little off, right? So if you just add those chapters in there, add intentional breaks for the reader to take, I think that would have, I don't know, a small nitpick, but that's what I think. So yeah, overall, I did enjoy this book. It's a solid story with, I like the main protagonist of Lori and Annette and that relationship, and there is some emotional payoff. And I just have some small, very minor nitpicks that for you may not even bother you at all. And you may think I'm crazy or whatever. That's fine. Um, but I would be very curious to hear what you guys just think in the comment section down below. I do recommend you check this book out. The artwork's beautiful. It's amazing to look at. I would love to see it, maybe even like an oversized hardcover or something. This is a hardcover, but it's not oversized, which is fine. But I think if you do something like the size of more of a image deluxe, like the size of like the Saga Deluxes or Criminal, I think that'd be awesome. Or you could even do like the Desolation Jones Deluxe, where it's pretty big. I think that would be awesome, especially because the artwork is just so good. Um, but yeah, that's going to do it for today's video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and we will catch you in the next Comics Corner.